Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Tiny Experiments. So in this episode we are going to be looking at LLM prompt personas through a series of, not surprisingly, very tiny experiments so we can really get to the fundamentals, and then we're going to cap it off with something slightly larger which sort of brings it all together. This idea of a mentor bot, which we'll get onto in a moment. Now, in order to do these experiments, you'll need a few things to start with. I'm going to upload this, as I always do with these episodes from this series, to my GitHub page. I'll include links in the description for that. But in addition to that, you will need a mixture of the following. So one way to do this, because you're going to need Python, is to install Python and then do a pip install for Jupyter Lab. So then you've got Python and Jupyter Lab. So that will give you the programming environment as far as as far as Python's concerned. The alternative is to do what I do, which is simply to install Anaconda, which has everything in it. The other bits you'll need on top of that is you will of course need Ollama, because we're using large language models in Ollama. So you'll need to download and install that. And at the very least you will need one model. For these experiments I'm using Llama 2. It's a year old now. You could use something a bit newer, and I'm just using the standard model you get when you do this command at the command line once you've installed Ollama, which will give you the 7 billion parameter version, but it's quite sufficient for what we're doing. And also, because we're going to lean into the Ollama Python library, you'll need to install the Ollama Python library. Just makes things a little bit easier. In some episodes I will actually do this just purely using, the built-in request library. But sometimes I just like to lean into Ollama, and particularly for this episode because it makes things a little bit simpler. You'll notice that a lot of this stuff's real quick and dirty. It's that way by design. We're not doing much exception handling here. We are doing a little bit, but it's very basic. So to start off with, we've imported Ollama. Our model is just going to be Llama 2, as I've said. You could download some other models, try those out if you want. We've got a function defined here called getMentorResponse, which takes a user prompt and a system prompt. Now the purpose of this episode is we're going to look at sort of interactively using a combination of system prompts to give our LLM its basic persona, and then contextually we might be doing some clever things with the actual user prompt to add a little bit more context on top of the system prompt. So you can see in the function, in our messages, we're sending both parts here, and then we get a response back. And we're only interested in, for this experiment, these set of experiments, what's in the message content key value pair from the API response, the JSON response. Okay, so first up, and you can see I've already pre-run these because we're using a local LLM. It's going to be a little bit slow. Doesn't really matter if you're just playing around with the basics here. You could use an online model for this. The setup will be slightly different here, and you'd have slightly different access points, but equally you could go online and grab, say, the Gemini access point and refactor this so it uses that instead. But I like to play around with local models, even though it runs a little bit slower on this machine I've got. So first up, just basic problem solving. So the persona is one of these typical, you're a patient, encouraging senior software engineer, mentoring a junior developer. Your goal is to guide them to solutions by providing hints and encouraging independent problem solving rather than giving direct answers. Always maintain a supportive and positive tone. And then we have here, I'm trying to reverse a string in Python. Can you give me a hint on where to start? And then the response is going to be this get mentor response function where we're taking in the system prompt and the user prompt, which we've just assigned. And it's just going to print it out here. So, oh great, reversing a string is a fun challenge. Let me ask you something. Have you tried using the built-in reversed function in Python? It can help you reverse a string by iterating over its characters in reverse order. Give it a try and see if that helps get you started. So you can see it's being fairly, I don't know if obtuse is the right word, but as it said, is the goal is to guide them rather than giving them direct answers. So that's one possible trick you can do with sort of personas. And we've got a different experiment here, which is explaining the concept. So, experienced computer science professor. Now, we could structure this with anything. The whole point of these experiments is you can go in and you can modify these system prompts. But I'm sticking with sort of more computer science, programming-based personas. Explaining concept programming, complex programming concepts to someone with very little technical background. Use simple analogies and avoid jargon where possible. Your explanations could be clear, concise. It should be clear, concise, and easy to grasp. So what we're doing also, we're complementing that with a user prompt that says, explain recursion to me like I'm 10 years old. So you can see how the system prompt and the user prompt are sort of, what's the best word to describe this? Are done in a certain way to synergize with one another. That's the word I was looking for, to synergize with one another. And so here we get, an answer. There we go. Like I'm 10 years old. Experiment 3, code review. So you're a seasoned code reviewer. You can see a pattern emerging here, focusing on providing constructive feedback to help the developer improve, highlight areas for learning, suggest practice, and explain why certain changes may be beneficial. Maintain a supportive and pedagogical tone. And then here's the code snippet going in. Now, additionally, the user prompt has some additional padding here. So we've got, here is a simple Python function, and then a code snippet. Any initial thoughts or improvements, keeping in mind I'm still learning. So we've added in some, an extra wrapping, if you like, for the code snippet to construct our user's prompt. So before we've got system prompt and user prompt. For this one, we've got system prompt, the code snippet, and then encasing that inside the user prompt. But you can see that the function is called in the same way. And there's our answer. And you can see we've got a number of different parts to this. So it goes through and suggests some different approaches for that. Suggested learning resources personalised. So you're a career counsellor and learning path advisor in software development. When asked about learning resources, recommend a diverse set of books, online courses, tutorial projects, and explain their potential benefits. Encourage continuous learning and practical application. And the user prompt is, I want to learn more about data structures in Python. What are some good resources or topics to explore? Now remember here we're using an LLM here that's a year old. So any suggestions that it makes are going to be, restricted by that, window of time. But you can see here we've got a number of useful sections: books, online courses, tutorials and projects. Experiment 5, encouragement motivation. You're a highly empathetic and encouraging mentor. Your primary role is to boost confidence, celebrate success and offer gentle guidance during challenges. Always acknowledge effort and progress and provide actionable next steps that foster continued growth. User prompt: I just finished my first small Python project and it worked. What's a good next step to keep motivated? And there we have the response. Brainstorming ideas, creative technical lead who loves to brainstorm project ideas with new developers. Your role is to spark imagination, offer diverse perspectives and help refine initial concept into actionable project outlines. Ask clarifying questions to understand their interests better. And then there's the user prompt: I want to build a small Python project related to text processing any simple ideas. So again, you can see how the system prompts for most of these are like complementing the user prompt in some way. So there is a bit of sculpting going on here. And then we have the answer. Experiment 7, debugging assistance. You are a seasoned software debugger and problem solver. Instead of directly fixing bugs, you guide developers through a methodical debugging process. Ask diagnostic questions, suggest common debugging techniques and help isolate the root cause. My Python script is giving a type error, unsupported operand types, but I can't figure out why. What are some common causes for this error and how can I find it? And there's the response. So you can see we've got some quite in-depth responses there. Experiment 8, career path discussion, strategic. You are a long-term career strategist in the tech industry. People provide insightful advice on career development, skill acquisition and navigating the professional landscape. Focus on sustainable growth and future-proofing one's career, not just immediate job placements. User prompt: I'm interested in a career in data science. What are some key skills I should focus on developing for long-term success? And then we have our answer here. And again, remember that any answer in a closed system like this with an LLM that's a year old, you're going to get answers that are time constrained by that. Experiment 9, ethical considerations. You're an ethical AI consultant and responsible technology advocate. When discussing a project, always prompt the user to consider the ethical implications, potential biases and societal impact. Encourage a thoughtful and responsible approach to technology development. I'm thinking of building a web scraper. What are some ethical considerations I should keep in mind? And then there's a response for that. And then equipment, experiment 10, asking why. Socratic method. Now, you can see with all of these, they're all, there's just one response. We're not looping around in any way. This experiment is one that would benefit from a lot of further tweaking where you find a way to sort of loop back round. So we're just doing one single round here, but this is a fun one to play around with, particularly with Socratic method. So you can see it's a pretty short answer here. And the system prompt is: you're a highly curious and insightful mentor who uses Socratic method. When a mentee states an observation or conclusion, your primary goal is to ask probing questions that encourage them to elaborate, justify and deepen their understanding. Do not provide answers directly, but guide them to discover insights themselves. And the user prompt is: I just learned about object-oriented programming. It seems useful. Interesting. Can you tell me about what you found useful about object-oriented programming? What specifically did you learn that caught your attention? So you can see where that would be useful to have in some sort of recursive Socratic interaction loop. So then you can bring this all together. Yeah, you can bring it all together. So you could create a mentor bot. Now, this is a pretty quick and dirty mentor bot. What we're doing here is we're taking a much larger system prompt and mushing together some of the ideas previously. Okay, so you can see some of the stuff in the previous system prompts integrated into this. So you're probably going to get quite wordy answers for this. And what it does with this one is, you'll see in a moment, is the part of it which sends a message to Ollama actually aggregates previous responses. As well as having the system prompt, it has a conversation history and the current message. And the current message and the answer from the system get added to that conversation history. Now, this could get very large. So as a sort of precaution, it is capping this off at 5 responses, which is 10, because there's 2 pairs. There's the user and there's the response. So yeah. So you've got user's message, mentor's response. Okay, going through, and they're being added each time to this, concatenated, I suppose, the word I should be using, to this conversation history. There's lots of rooms here to tweak this. You may want to reduce down the system prompt a little bit. You may want to play with the history window. Maybe the history window has the potential to get too large. You might want to look at summarizing stuff, ways to do that, because it could get pretty big under certain QA scenarios for this. There was one other thing. Oh yeah, there is an initial context message. Now in this version of it, we don't add it to the history. It's just an idea for a future initial step. And it basically just says, oh, here's the date and this is where I am. It's not actually pulling the location there. It's actually hard-coded in Nova Scotia, so you could change that to something else. But it is getting the current date time. And that, if you wanted, could be added to the start of the conversation. You know, maybe you wanted some sort of initial contextual setup beyond the mentor system prompt. But at the moment, it's not putting that in. The conversation history starts off blank and it's just echoing this back to the screen. But down here, once we get into the real deal, then stuff is being added. So you can see this is I think a 3 cycle I did before I started recording. So here's our initial context, as I said, not really being added to anything. So this is what I asked it. How do I learn about the programming language? NIM, this is the response. Then, and you can see it's covering a lot of bases because of the system prompt. So buried in amongst this, there was a question about what motivated you to learn NIM. So I just said, I'm interested in what unique features it may have over other programming languages. So there's a response to that from MentorBot. And then I thought, oh, zero cost abstraction looks existing. So the question is, what is zero cost abstraction? And I get MentorBot coming back, an excellent question, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, oh, you mentioned something in a previous response about debugging tool. Can you tell me more? An interested mentee, smiling, of course. Yeah, it's putting in a lot of emojis and it's very chatty. And again, you know, you can play around with its persona here to change that if you want to change its style. And then we've got a bit about debugging tool, and then it's asking me to respond again. So it will just keep on doing this until I either type, I think it's quit or exit to get out of here, which is monitoring for the input of. Again, this is going to be pretty slow on some machines. but it's a fun thing to play around with. And again, you know, if you wanted to mess around with other online APIs, you could refactor this to use those. You'll notice the response here, the message is new, so it's not dependent on this bit here. You can see I've got the library references in here independently, so this one is independent. And so I could go in and, you know, type in what else has it said about here. Profiling, testing, continuous integration. What is CI/CD? And then it'll mull it over. And of course, each time, the other thing about this is the contextual thing you're submitting is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So again, that's something to bear in mind here. So of course, as you do that, things are going to slow down. But it's an interesting concept to play around with in here. So that's why I sort of added it to the end as a sort of capstone project. Anyway, thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I'll catch you in a future episode.